Thank you so much for being with us today, and welcome to our webinar on the Inflation Reduction Act and its use for manufacturers. There's a lot to go over, but we have taken a particular focus on the applicable sections in the Act that will be relevant to decarbonizing facilities today, rather than focus on the provisions that will help prepare the market for certain solutions in the future. So we hope this will be useful for you. Let's go over the agenda for today. We'll start off with quick introductions and jump into the main bulk of the talk, which is an overview of the Inflation Reduction Act. We'll quickly dip into Skyven's grant services and end with a really exciting funding opportunity by the DOE that has just opened up a week or two ago. And then we'll leave about 5 minutes for questions at the end. So please don't hesitate to put your questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them as we go or address them at the end of the talk. So joining us today from the Renewable Thermal Collaborative are Chris Kardish and Hunter Hollander, who have been working hard to analyze the Inflation Reduction Act and pull out insights for the industrial sector. For those of you who are not familiar with the Renewable Thermal Collaborative, or the RTC for short, it is a leading global coalition for companies, institutions, and governments committed to scaling up renewable heating and cooling at their facilities to dramatically reduce carbon emissions. So thank you guys for being with us here today. Before I turn it over to them, I want to go over the main areas of interest that we will be discussing today. So first of all, the Inflation Reduction Act brings $369 billion into measures to fight climate change. It's really big. The most relevant of which for us are the $10 billion available in tax credits and the $5.8 billion that will be available through grants, rebates, loans, or cooperative agreements. Both of these combined is going to give us ample opportunity for projects in the energy efficiency, beneficial electrification, and renewable buckets. Next, yeah, thank you. What we're particularly excited about at Skyven is the fact that the Act pushes qualifying projects to show meaningful reductions, meaning 20% or more of carbon reductions, which will be a powerful incentive to push these projects forward internally. You can see here on the slide that some of these projects are solutions that fall in the category, as I said, of energy efficiency. So we have condensing economizers, dry recuperators, other heat recovery solutions. You have beneficial electrification, so heat pumps and MVR systems. And then in renewables, there's a lot going on there as well with solar thermal, geothermal, hydrogen, etc. So I am going to turn it over now to Chris and Hunter for a deeper dive into the tax credits and the Advanced Industrial Decarbonization Program. So take it away, guys.
Thanks, Inbal. Thanks for having me today. I'm going to start us off with some kind of higher level takeaways. So the law extends some credits for some existing credits for some renewable thermal technologies like solar thermal and geothermal, also geothermal heat pumps, while also creating some new credits. Hydrogen in particular is a winner here, but also things like biogas and RNG, as well as thermal storage. At the same time, a lot of these credits, especially sort of the investment tax credits for renewable thermal technologies or sort of heating solutions, will expire effectively after 2024. That said, there's also still a lot of support more broadly to decarbonize the electricity grid through long-term extensions of production tax credits and investment tax credits on the renewable electricity side that will not expire. And there's also some support to incentivize the electrification of process heat, like through some of the programs that Inbal just pointed out, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in a second. Funding is somewhat limited there and will be competitive, but there are some really interesting opportunities. You can go ahead to the next slide if you like. So to begin quickly with some of the overarching provisions. So these are kind of the terms that are widely applied to the tax credits. You'll see them over and over again. And transferability is something that has not historically been applied to energy tax credits, but the IRA effectively extends them to, in some form, to almost all of those credits. And that just refers to the ability to sell or transfer a credit to an unrelated taxpayer. Also keeping in mind that the person who buys it has to follow the rules regarding eligibility to claim that credit. And that provision combined with direct pay, which is more relevant for tax exempt organizations and governments, are aimed at kind of helping entities to finance these investments without, and yeah, we'll see sort of also in the guidance that we have coming out about that. Then on the rates of how these things are treated, most of these credits generally have a base rate, and then meeting certain conditions, that base rate increases significantly. So specifically, when meeting prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements that are set by the Department of Labor, a production tax credit increases by 5 times effectively. And an investment tax credit goes from like 6% to 30% when meeting those conditions. Additionally, you can go beyond 30% for an ITC when
Chris, you're cutting out.
and you are being still cutting out.
Yeah, you are.
It's weird. I don't know.
Maybe turn your video off, Chris.
Yeah. Is that any better? Turning my video off?
I think so. Let's try that.
Okay. So in addition to the prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements, you can get additional bonuses on top of that. We're still hearing me?
Yep.
Okay. And the domestic content requirements just concern how you're sourcing materials, particularly iron and steel. And then
Hunter, do you want to take over for him? You're on mute.
Yeah, I guess maybe we should then skip ahead to the hydrogen pieces, since this is Chris's arena here. Yeah, Chris, we'll give you a chance to figure whatever's going out, and then we'll circle back to you. All right, cool. All right, perfect. So yeah, I'll go over the hydrogen tax credits in the IRA and the Advanced Industrial Facilities Deployment Program. And excuse me, I'm still getting over a little something here. So there are 2 hydrogen tax credits in the IRA. There's the production tax credit and the investment tax credit. The production tax credit is what hydrogen folks are really most excited about. And the reason why is because you can now claim, now that it's now law, you can claim up to $3 per kilogram of clean hydrogen through 2032. And that's a big deal, the fact that this tax credit is locked in for the next 10 years. As Chris was saying earlier with some of the investment tax credits, they expire at the end of 2024. But since this is locked in for the next decade, all parties involved, producers, investors, buyers, etc., should be totally confident in the staying power of this tax credit and that it's not going to lapse, and then there's uncertainty if Congress is going to extend it. The percentage of the credit is based on the life cycle greenhouse gas emissions associated from the production of that clean hydrogen. And just to simplify things, and I could go into more detail maybe in Q&A, but green hydrogen is that you can claim 100% of the credit for that, and blue hydrogen you get either 20, 25%, or 33.4%. What's also interesting is the fact this tax credit can be combined with renewable energy tax credits, but not with carbon capture tax credits. So with green hydrogen, you can get like double tax credits, and with blue, you can only get one. That's interesting because I think that really indicates where policymakers are at with respect to blue versus green hydrogen, and shows that they have a much stronger affinity for green. And also, this is probably really just the main takeaway here with the hydrogen tax credits in general, is that projections have been rolling in showing that by the end of this decade, the cost of green hydrogen is going to be more or less, maybe a little more, but more or less $1 per kilogram by 2030. And that's just a huge deal, because that goes to show that in the medium run, green hydrogen is going to be much more competitive with other non-renewable thermal options. So with the ITC, this is also tucked into Section 48, which hopefully Chris can talk about in a little bit. But so the way that this works is that hydrogen is now defined as a storage medium. Energy storage has been part of the tax code for some time, but now hydrogen is defined as a storage medium, so that's how it's tucked in there. And there's also been, for years, a fuel cell investment tax credit in Section 48, and that's also just been extended. And the 6% to 30%, and also the PTC, the up to $3, that has to do with prevailing wage and labor requirements that Chris was about to talk about a little earlier. Or actually, you can go back just one more second. One big piece of news with respect to the hydrogen ITC, and I guess also the PTC, is that Amazon recently came to a big deal with Plug Power, and Plug Power is a hydrogen fuel cell company. And in the deal, there's a lot within it, but one of the main bits is that Amazon will be outfitting dozens more of their fulfillment centers with hydrogen storage and dispensing systems. So those are properties of which would fall under this ITC. And I highly doubt that it's a coincidence that that deal occurred just weeks after this bill was signed into law. So next slide, please.
Thanks so much, Hunter. Chris, back over to you. Let's go over in just 5 minutes here the 48 ITC and the Advanced Industrial Facilities Deployment Program.
Oh, Chris.
Chris, you're on mute if you're trying to talk.
Sure, I will be very quick, and I'll leave my video off. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're coming through.
Okay, so with the Section 48 ITC, generally all of these credits will expire after 2024, with the exception of geothermal heat pumps. And generally that same structure of a base rate of 6, then going to 30% when meeting domestic, so the prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements applies. Solar thermal and geothermal were already in the tax code, as was geothermal heat pumps. The heat pumps get a special treatment in terms of essentially an extra decade of eligibility. So those are treated quite well. Then biogas and RNG and thermal storage are new additions to the Section 48 ITC, and the biogas and RNG provisions also include cleaning and conditioning property for refining biogas to RNG. The thermal storage provisions are more explicitly aimed at building decarbonization for systems that are connected directly to HVAC systems for heating or cooling, but there might be some opportunities for industrial players with integrated process heating and HVAC systems. Next. And the Section 48C investment tax credit's really interesting because it's a very versatile program. That said, there are some limitations on the funding, and it will be probably quite competitive. So this was an Obama era program that was depleted and never replenished. But the IRA replenishes it and also expands eligibility significantly. So historically, it was just available to producers of renewable technologies or fuels. And now qualifying projects include re-equipping industrial or manufacturing facilities, any facility with equipment that will reduce emissions by at least 20% through measures that include efficiency, waste reduction, carbon capture, and lower zero carbon heat processes. So that follows that 6 to 30% ITC structure. Funding is limited to 10 billion, 4 billion of which has to go to energy communities. So lower income census tracts or those with legacy fossil fuel interests. And you can go ahead to the next slide.
Coming here, let's jump back one more. Perfect. So yeah, I'll just quickly hit the main points with the Advanced Industrial Facility Deployment Program. This is also a really interesting program. It says 5.8 billion over the next 4 years, but it's closer to 5.6 after the administrative costs. But what's really interesting about this program is that I think it's going to be the real jump ball that a lot of industrial facility or industrial entities are going to be focused on getting and competing for, because the financial assistance from this program can really go in a lot of different directions, and the language is broad enough, perhaps intentionally so, to allow for this program to be somewhat of like a wild card for the industrial decarbonization space. The financial assistance is going to be for decarbonization projects, but there's a wide range of how that could be applied. It's also important to note that with the financial assistance is going to be based on a few criteria, but the top line criteria is the expected greenhouse gas emission reductions of a project, and that's what it says in the greenhouse gas emission reductions. But what's important to note is that it doesn't necessarily need to be the expected emission reductions of a single project, because the intent of this bill and this section and the intent from this administration is to lead to like sector-wide and economy-wide emissions reductions. If when folks here are engaging with the DOE and the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations, if the point can be made that the financial assistance for project X could be critical in terms of getting a certain technology to scale that can lead to that sector-wide or that economy-wide emission reductions, that can be a really key point in terms of whether or not you're able to get financial assistance and cash in on your decarbonization project. And lastly, with this, with heavy industry, in the text, heavy industry is referenced, and they specifically refer to like chemicals, steel, cement, concrete, and all that. But the language encompasses like those non-heavy industries. So if folks here aren't necessarily within the quote-unquote heavy industry sector, you should still be able to cash in on the program. And one other quick bit here is that this program is going to be administered by the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations. So engaging with them is going to be key, which ties perfectly into the next slide. So us at the RTC, we're hosting a summit here in DC in a month, when actually I think the weather is going to be the absolute best here in DC throughout the entire year. It's going to be exactly a month, and there's going to be a few events relevant to folks here. We'll be going in depth with the Inflation Reduction Act and going over our vision report launch and discussing the Department of Energy. But there's also going to be, as I teased a moment ago, some folks from the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations, and I'm sure that they'd be eager to hear who's got decarbonization projects teed up and portfolios for projects at scale, because they've got the bank to help finance these projects, and so I'm sure they would love to learn more about these projects, especially in a face-to-face setting. So The link to where you can learn more and register is at the top.
Thank you so much, Hunter. And Chris as well for that overview with the technical difficulties, always happens. I want us to talk about the current funding opportunity. It's really exciting, but before we do that, I have to quickly mention that Skyven has robust grant writing and management services. Part of our approach to decarbonization projects is to utilize any available public funding to make projects pencil. And as you can see, the Inflation Reduction Act is going to make a real difference with the type of projects we've been discussing. Over the last couple of years, we've won tens of millions of dollars on behalf of our customers in grants and rebates, which dovetails nicely to the last topic for today, which is that funding opportunity that we've been talking about. I'll have Clay Monahan, who is Skyven Solution Architecture Team Lead, tell you more about it. Clay, over to you.
Thanks, Inbal. All right, everybody, I promise to only take 2 minutes here so we can leave some time for questions. So I know this is a webinar on the IRA, but I really wanted to share a little bit of bonus content here. So I bugged Inbal until she let me have a couple of slides. So thanks again, Inbal. So the DOE just announced or just released $100 million in funding for decarbonization projects only a couple weeks ago under the Industrial Efficiency and Decarbonization Funding Opportunity Announcement. So deadlines for this grant are coming up quickly here. So I wanted to make sure folks are aware of the opportunity because I think just about everyone could be eligible for funding for this grant if you're either in the right sector or implementing the right technology. So first, concept papers are due in just 3 weeks, which is required in order to submit a final application, which are due at the end of December. In those end of the year applications, participation of industry partners is highly encouraged. Skyven plans to go after a number of these sections or a number of these applications in each section, depending on interest from our partners. Because of our grant experience involved detailed in the very narrow window for these applications, we're really excited about this opportunity to actually get a few decarbonization projects rolling and done as soon as next year or soon into 2024. Okay, so moving on to the next slide here. All right, so there are 6 sections to this grant with 2 different funding levels in each section, which are dependent basically on technology readiness level. I'm not going to go on the details here, but I'm happy to talk about it afterwards. Each section names specific areas of interest that the DOE would like to see applications fall under. Many of these areas of interest are sector specific. However, each section has an area of interest focused on decarbonizing thermal heat, which is our mission here at Skyven. The 6th section here focuses on cross-cutting technologies that could be implemented across the industrial sector at large. Under this section, Skyven will be particularly focused on the 3rd area of interest, which is industrial heat pumps, which are, for those who don't know, a bypassable and redundant steam or hot water generation system that sources heat from on-site. Basically, if you have a cooling tower and you use steam, this technology could be a way to electrify your steam generation with 1/3 of the electricity of an electric boiler or less. Anyway, that was a lot for 2 minutes, so feel free to reach out to me with questions directly. I'd be happy to talk about it some more.
Thank you so much, Clay. All right, so I know that we threw a lot at you there pretty fast. I wanted to give the opportunity for anyone to ask any questions. Feel free to, just chime in here or continue to.
There were a couple in the chat that I wanted to ask.
Sure, go ahead.
So Neil asked, is the production of the $1 per kilogram hydrogen, does that include the benefits of the PTC? So that's for Hunter.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you asked that. Yeah, that's assuming that production tax credits can be locked in. I guess that's a different question, in the year 2033. But it's a good opportunity to mention that the Department of Energy for the last a little over a year or so has had an initiative called High Shot. And the intent of the program the initiative was to get the cost of clean hydrogen down to $1 per kilogram within a decade. And there's a lot of efforts that are engaged that went into that. And I'm sure that intent is partially taking place within the bipartisan infrastructure bill with the hydrogen hubs and the money for electrolyzers and some other funding in other areas, and especially in this bill. But in short, that's the goal, is to get $1 per kilogram, by hook or by crook. And it looks like, based on the projections that have been rolling in, Bloomberg NEF and Rhodium Group have already put out a couple, and I'm sure there'll be some more that will come in soon, that are all basically painting the same picture. Maybe not exactly $1 a kilogram, a little more, but that's what we're looking at. It looks like we're going to be able to pull it off as a country.
Next question we just have from Jake. I'll just read it out loud here. I've read that the IRA, in the IRA, that nonprofits, governments, residential, etc., are able to now capture the 30% ITC through 2030, but it's not necessarily directed at for-profit businesses. Chris, could you take this question?
Sure. Which FITC? Because we're generally speaking, a lot of those ITCs on renewable thermal, those will expire after 2024. And you're referring to 2030. But the only thing that's not going to be available to for-profits are the direct pay provisions. But so yeah, so the solar credit, both photovoltaic and thermal, you'd be eligible for the 30%, assuming you're meeting prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements for the labor that went into constructing those pieces of equipment. You just wouldn't be eligible for direct pay. That's the distinction. So you wouldn't be eligible for direct pay if like your entity's tax liability or payments exceed your tax liability. So you wouldn't be able to get like a direct refund.
All right, thank you so much, Chris. That concludes our webinar for today. We breezed through it very quickly, and we really appreciate your time here. Thank you so much to Hunter and Chris and Clay for speaking. And if you guys have any more questions, feel free to contact us. You can see here our contact information on the slide, or Hunter just sent his and Chris's contact information in the chat as well. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time.